Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Simply Connected podcast, where we unpack the complexities of broadband connectivity. And today I'm joined by Paul Hague from BlackDice. Good to see you, Paul.
Hi there, John. Hi, how you doing?
Very good, thank you. And yourself?
Yeah, all good, thank you. All good.
Excellent. So we'll start with a bit of a brief intro, Paul. So if you don't mind introducing yourself, what you do.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Paul Hague, CEO, founder of BlackDice Cyber. Way too many years in the technology sector, which I won't go into right here. But I run a cybersecurity business that's focused on providing solutions to telecoms operators for their residential and SME subscribers, helping to keep them safe online.
And today we're going to be talking about telcos and their evolution as they move more towards being a service provider rather than just being the pipe that provides the connectivity for their end users. So to kick things off, one of the things that I've seen being bandied around a little bit is this idea of connectivity being a fourth utility, if you like. Do you agree? Is that something you buy into?
I personally, I think it's been a utility for many years. If you look at the kind of the infrastructure build out and how people use it over the last 20 years or so, I think it's absolutely an argument that it becomes a utility. And of course, once it becomes a utility, you then have business issues around how you differentiate yourself in the market. But it's I think I was looking at it was a while ago, but looking at a kind of meme online about the Maslow hierarchy of needs, and you kind of went through all those phases, and at the top it was Wi-Fi, or the bottom it was Wi-Fi, whichever it was, and I think we are there. I think it's we have a society now that is unbelievably reliant on online access, and so it inevitably becomes a utility, and all the problems that come with that.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that that updated hierarchy of needs as well. Actually, I do quite like that. Takes me back to my business and management studying days when I remember that. Before the Wi-Fi made it into that list.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess from that perspective, then connectivity, as it is fairly commoditized, you would say, right? You know, everyone kind of expects to be connected. How far up does that come? You know, and when I think about how people are connected with their own devices and at home, you know, and today we're going to talk about things like value-added services. How far up does that come in terms of like end users' expectations as to what's a commodity versus what's like a feature, if you like?
Well, look, in my mind, it's relatively easy to define a commodity product, and if you are always competing on price, which I know that lots of operators will say they compete on speed, but it's all the same, isn't it? You know, and from a customer point of view, it's very difficult to kind of differentiate between whether I get half a gig or a gig, or I get 350 meg or I get 750 meg. You know, there comes a point where that message becomes irrelevant because my web pages can only be refreshed so quickly at a certain speed on my laptop. So I think that. Just kind of going back to that first point, that is, for me, that's the definition of kind of utility and commodity. It's a utility product with a commodity price structure, because the differentiation becomes quite difficult. I think from a user point of view, it's very difficult for them to be able to differentiate across one service provider to the next, apart from price and speed. And if you are now not really competing on speed because everyone's doing the same, then the only place you have to go is price, and that for me causes that kind of race to the bottom on pricing, and there must come a point where the price can't go down anymore. It's just not possible. So in terms of that In terms of that user, then the user is looking for quality of experience. How do I make sure that my quality of experience in the home is how it needs to be? They're looking to be safe online. So how do I look to my operator to make sure that I'm safe online, whether that's through education, entertainment, business transactions, whatever it is? The first port of call is the operator. So there are certainly ways and means that the operator is able to do that, but it takes some investment, doesn't it, around those kind of services to make sure that what they are offering the customer is first of all is what they want, and secondly, it's sufficient to do one of two things, whether it's around a revenue generation or it's around kind of churn, customer acquisition. It's got to be capable of doing both those things.
I fully agree. And I guess in terms of that transition that's been made, you're absolutely right. There's no operators are forced now to find some other ways to differentiate. Do you think that was always going to happen, or do you think there's been other kind of measures that have pushed it? I'm thinking COVID, going back 5 years, everyone kind of transitioned to working from home, and that forced it. Do you think it was inevitable? It was going to end up this way anyway?
Yeah. I mean, even back from my time, back in the kind of very late 90s, early 2000s, it was pretty clear that sooner or later that was going to happen. I think COVID's accelerated it and made it. Again, we talk about that hierarchy of needs. It's moved it further up because people are expecting to work from home, whether it's permanent or a hybrid model, or it doesn't really matter, does it? Particularly, if I'm whether I'm working at home Monday to Friday or I'm working at home on a Thursday, I still want the same kind of quality of experience. I still want to be able to be safe online, and I think what's happened with the kind of working from home piece is that it's extended that network boundary as well, hasn't it? So before it was relatively straightforward. If you worked for, I don't know, Barclays, your network perimeter were the offices and the data center and the servers. Now that network perimeter is where it's dotted around potentially people's homes and those sorts of things. So that it becomes, I think it becomes more complicated for the business, but I think that opens up an opportunity, in my mind, that opens up an opportunity for the operator, because they now have an opportunity to provide services to those corporates. That means that they are protecting that network perimeter outside of their kind of traditional buildings. So with every issue comes an opportunity, doesn't there? It just depends whether or not the people involved in that are capable of taking advantage of that opportunity. Can I just say on top of that then? So on top of that, I think cybersecurity is a key part of that, as is quality of experience. And in our world, I don't see how you differentiate those two things. I don't understand how you can provide a quality of experience into the home or the business or whoever your subscriber, your customer is, without understanding what the cyber posture of that particular device, network, customer is. So where we talk about quality of experience, we talk about quality of experience, but in relation to how cybersecurity affects that particular posture. Because if you have, let's say you are clearly relying on your Wi-Fi signal at home, that Wi-Fi signal is dependent on a number of different things. Whether it's placement of and kind of speed of data to the device, whether it's around where the Wi-Fi pods, the meshes, are put in place, or whether it's around you've got things that are happening on the network and pushing lots of data across the network that shouldn't be. All of those things contribute towards that quality of experience, and I think and I don't think you should be looking at those things in isolation. I think you have to look at cybersecurity about keeping people safe, but cybersecurity also about quality of experience for those subscribers.
On that then, in terms of the experience as a user, you want that to be fairly invisible, right? You want it to be, you don't want them to see that there's anything going on. I come from a pay TV background where the features of that are kind of front and center from a user perspective, because you want to be interacting with the device. In the connectivity landscape, actually, You don't really want the user interacting with the device that's keeping them connected. You just want it to do the thing it needs to do and keep them connected safely.
Well, yeah, because you look at any kind of router that's or gateway or whatever that's ONT that's in the home, and they are clearly designed by engineers. Going onto your home router and trying to work out what on earth is going on for the average person, the average person in the street is just impossible. It's a whole load of numbers and letters and nonsense. So I do think that part of that is also around how do we make these things easy. So I agree with you. I was involved in pay TV piece as well. Absolutely, you want all the features front and center because it's a bright new shiny thing, and you want people to be able to search, and you want people to have that lean back entertainment experience. Whereas this isn't quite like that. It ends up being a technology and engineering led feature set. How do you make that sensible for the consumer so it's not overwhelming? And we may well, in the background have all of our machine learning and looking for trends and patterns and all those kinds of things, but the customer doesn't care about that. They're not interested in that. What they're actually interested in is whether or not we can keep them safe online. And what they're interested in is if there are any issues, how do we communicate those issues in a fashion that means that they have sufficient understanding that they can actually do something about it. So, and I think you look at that kind of comparison to pay TV, and I think it's a good one. And then that's about communication. So how do we communicate this stuff back to the consumer that means that they are staying safe online without making it a degree in computer science, which is, a lot of the router interfaces are just almost impossible to use.
Yeah, and I guess as well, if you pair that with, if you look at traditional utilities, you've got your gas, electric, your water, those are very much in the background. Again, you don't want to be interacting with your utility provider. You want that to be very much in the background. And actually, those utility providers have very limited information about their end user, whereas this is almost like a super utility in that as a connectivity provider, you know quite a lot about your end user, right? So you're in a good position to be able to deliver what they want based on all that data that exists on your end user.
Yeah, exactly. You look at you only have to look at the debacle around smart meters to show you how poor some utility companies are at kind of managing that end user experience because they've never had to. And yeah, I think with the operator and the kinds of the sorts of anonymized data that we capture means that they can be proactive. You can understand exactly what's going on in a home network and spot problems and be in touch with those customers before those problems have happened, or even remedy something and let the consumer know what you've done because you found a problem. So and we kind of and all of that data also means that we kind of take the operator away from turning the router off and on again into something that's a little bit more tangible for the consumer and stops those calls coming in. Lots of these calls and customer interactions are very expensive for operators to manage and handle. So if we can cut that, if we can give them information where we do, we increase their ability to provide first time call resolution and stop secondary calls coming in around the same problem, then there are other benefits around what we do and that data and kind of trend analysis that we do. So the more information that you have about the customer, the better it is that you can support them. It's like going into a networking event, isn't it? And you know who's there, but if you don't do any research on the people that are there, you literally spend your time going, "How are you? Where do you live?" All that sort of stuff. Which is you could have done that previously. Whereas I think with the kinds of data that we can capture here, it starts to become interesting because you already know that. So now you're looking at you're away from the small talk and you're into something that's a little bit deeper.
So do you think there's a challenge for operators, just going back to what we were saying before about making how visible those features are? And I think, if we are in the industry, we see what's going on and we know all the things that are going on in that router. Your average user probably doesn't know that. And also, well, in fact, there's a couple of questions that come to mind here. I'll start with, how do operators get around the unpredictability of users, especially in this case. But you don't know how your user is going to react, and we come up with these ways of delivering these value-added services. We use the data that's available to us to capture most of those use cases. How do you predict for that volatility? And maybe there's no good answer here, but I am curious as to your thoughts.
Well, it kind of comes down to communication, doesn't it? I mean, granted, you are if something is visible and you are monitoring it, then you have a responsibility to go back to your users and explain exactly what's going on. And I don't think that's a simple thing either. I think that's complicated. I think we can make it simpler for them, but it's still a complicated message, because what you don't want to do, you don't want to be putting out communication to your subscribers that says we've run our machine learning algorithms and we've seen certain patterns of data on your DNS that would suggest that you've got some kind of DNS flood running across the network, which is, I mean, you've just lost them, haven't you? And they've probably gone in the first couple of words. So I think it's really important about, and hopefully this is answering the question, but really important about how that information is communicated and how the benefit of that is communicated to the consumer, because again, you're right, that user experience, what you're not trying to do is you're not trying to create a problem around that user experience. You're trying to create something that works for the consumer. So when we work with our operator customers, we always get involved in the messaging, and how we inform the subscriber that we have been successful at what we do. Because that's the bit, isn't it? It's like, and what you don't want is an overload. You don't want your insurance company writing to you every time it's been raining outside, do you? And then they go, well, nothing's happened at your house, but we would have had you insured had it rained even harder. I mean, you're just not interested, are you? Yeah. So it's keeping that communication relevant, I think.
And just going back to what we were saying before about the users, and again, similar theme, how visible those features are. There's a kind of competing push, if you like, that I've observed in terms of it's really easy now as a user to switch away from one broadband provider to the next. And there's a big push to make that as easy as possible from a user perspective. So it's becoming increasingly more difficult for telcos to hold on to those customers. Is there a bit of a losing battle going on there? What do you think wins out? I guess what I'm trying to say is what do you think is foundational and differentiating? Where's that line almost for the user, I guess, is the question.
Well, look, again, providing internet connectivity into the home or the SME is a commodity, and you're going to try and go for the cheapest one. So, but there are, I think, defensive strategies that operators can put in place around things like value-add services. And value-add services, everyone has looked at value-add services in terms of revenue. Value-add services don't need to be about revenue. Value-add services is about a value-add service to the consumer. And if that value-add service results in either revenue or that user staying, you're extending the life cycle of that particular subscriber, then it's done its job. It doesn't always necessarily have to be about revenue. And when you look at the kinds of things that we do in terms of cybersecurity, or any kind of cybersecurity products that you've maybe used in the past, they're quite sticky. You don't kind of go. You're not switching antivirus vendors, for example. You're not switching that every 6 months, are you? Because it's a right old pain in the neck to do that. Whereas if you and this is kind of similar. So if you've got, the average home now is like, and it soon racks up, it's like 15, 20, 25 connected devices by the time you've kind of looked at everything that sits around your home. If all those are being protected and you have them set up, and you're getting communication from your operator around how it's being effective and how you've been protected, then that's a significant piece of information that sits in the consumer's mind, saying, well, do I really want to change? Is it, I've got, I know there's a substitution over here, but I've got all this stuff set up. I already know that that's keeping me safe there. So if I move somewhere else, first of all, I've got the hassle factor of having to set it all up again. Secondly, it's probably not in the same kind of format that I've got here. And thirdly, I can't be 100% sure that it's going to do the same job. So there are those kind of defensive strategies which I think value-add services provide, and certainly around cybersecurity for those operators, just to make it, I suppose, more difficult to switch. Because if regulation, etc., is making it easier to switch, then the operator has an opportunity to provide those kind of real value-add services into those subscribers that makes, from a whilst the choice to switch is relatively easy in terms of the kind of process, the choice to switch mentally becomes more difficult, because you know that you've got all this other stuff that kind of sits around it.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I think I did wonder a little bit if that move. It's always difficult to predict the behaviour of your end user, especially with things like that. And I often wonder if those things are almost a trigger, but then kind of buyer's regret kicks in pretty quickly. But also that same legislation enables them to unpick it pretty quickly and go back to the one where they had a good service. I wonder if there'll be an element of the grass isn't always as greener when people move and then decide to go, you know what, actually these guys looked after me pretty well. I know that because I barely had to talk to them and I was always connected and never had any issues, and that's the measure.
I think, you know what would be interesting? I was involved in this right in the early days around mobile number portability, where you could take your mobile number to different providers. This is how long ago? It was on fax. Anyway, that's a by the by. But my point around that is that the idea was to make it really, really easy for you to switch providers. Even now, and even with me in kind of in the middle of all of this, I'm always reticent to do that, because you don't know whether it's, and I've got a decent number as well, which kind of adds to the issue. But I'm always reticent to do it, because you never really quite know whether it's going to go according to plan, whether your number gets lost, whether your service gets removed for 3 or 4 days. So whilst they've made it easier, and this is the point I was making around those kind of value-add service for operators to give to their subscribers, I'm making the same point, is that if there's those little seeds of doubt around, well, what if my service goes? What if I get hacked in the middle of it? What happens if I can't set up all of the services that I've got on? What if the filtering isn't as good? All of that sort of stuff plays on the consumer's mind, as it does with me, at least, with the kind of number portability. There are hygiene factors associated with that, where you can't afford for your service to disappear for days on end, because we're back to commodity and utility, and you rely on these things.
And there are some, just I guess, some services and some features that are stickier than others, right? Because I guess you've got some which are, from an end user perspective, something like, as you say, the quality of service. It's, as a feature, it's good, but is it sticky in terms of, like, how easy is it to port from one thing to the next? Whereas you've got other things, I guess, like things like smart home and things like that, where you've got it really is tied into other devices they've got in their ecosystem and in that user's home. And I do wonder, actually, if that's the telco's long game, is to try and get into those kind of services, make it really easy to connect with other devices that are in the home of the user and exist there, so that it becomes more difficult for them to say, you know what, it works well, I get a good service from my operator, it's secure, and it supports all my smart home devices in my home. Why do I ever need to move? Well, I can certainly see as well in the future, not only the services that we see now, the kind of, the cybersecurity, quality of service, smart home, I think are the ones that obviously come to mind. But I think I can see in the long term, even things like closer relationships with energy providers and, the proper utility providers, and being able to, because again, you could kind of superpower the intelligence and the analytics that are going on there in terms of what's going on in a user's home, and that is extremely valuable, and you could deliver a better service on the back of that, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then insurance companies looking to provide cyber, increase their product portfolio to home users and maybe not so much SMEs, but certainly home users around, cyber security and cyber attacks and those sorts of things. You can see an insurance company partnering with an operator to provide that kind of value add product as an insurance, but using services like ours to power them, because now they've got data that means that they can underwrite the insurance policy, whereas before they don't have that. So I think there are quite a few partnerships that would that kind of spring out of this. Once you look at that kind of strategic intent to get deeper into a kind of consumer's life.
Okay, so on that kind of partnership theme, then, in the ecosystem, I guess, of broadband and connectivity, it's been the connectivity provider will have their software stack, their proprietary software stack, and then they work with people like you and others who do similar value-added services to integrate that into their devices, and that's been quite cumbersome in itself in the past. We've kind of moved now to this kind of place where we've got open source software that's supported on a lot of these stacks. For you as a provider of one of those value-added services, how significant is that in terms of shifting your focus from the effort is with integrating on individual devices for different operators versus where there's a level playing field now because we've got an open source software, so we can do that once, it'll work on anything that's supported by that open source software. So now we can focus on our differentiation. Is that a big factor for you? Does that make a big difference?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, if we can integrate once onto a particular software platform, be it Purple, OMWRT, RDK, whichever flavor you wish, then it's clearly it's easy. It's not only easier for us, but it's easier for the operator as well. There'll always be little bits and pieces that you have to try and sort out, but nothing too onerous. The days of having to spend 3 to 4 months trying to get something just to work on what should be the same version of Linux are kind of behind us, hopefully. So I think that means speed to market and covering your entire estate, because it actually becomes, I think it becomes quite difficult for any business if they're looking to launch products, but they can only launch products to particular segments of their consumer base based on the particular piece of hardware that they've got. I mean, good luck with that. So I think if you look at it from that point of view, where it speeds up the time to get the products to market, it speeds up our ability to support the operator and means that they can roll it out to their entire estate, then that whole push towards open source and software operating systems that are detached from the hardware, then for us that's a big bonus.
And it shifts where the investment is. If you think about historically, a lot of the investment went into that where the integration points were, and that's quite far away from the user in terms of delivering value. Whereas now, I guess, if those things are fairly well repeatable, and you don't have to invest in that every time because you do it once and then that carries through, then actually it allows operators and value-added service providers to invest where the value, where they're bringing value closer to the end user as well, right? So by default, that should give a better experience for the end user.
Yeah, absolutely. So you look at when we first started out in this 5 years ago, an integration would be taking us 3 to 4 months to try to get something working, and then we were potentially having to do it on 3 different models of router, all with different operating systems and all doing things ever so slightly differently. Now we're down to a couple of weeks. We can get our software installed, run, finished in a couple of weeks. Obviously the bonus for the operator is that, first of all, it's obviously cut down the cost quite considerably, and it's cut out some of that fear factor around, well, how complicated is this? We've got to get this out to our 2 million users, and we use 8 different routers and legacy, etc. Well, it's not quite so bad now. So that kind of environment absolutely helps the operator, without a doubt, and that time to market is critical.
And do you think, in terms of where the operator mindset is, do you think they're over that hurdle of, oh yeah, we understand now, we can do this quickly and it's repeatable, or do you think they're still convincing, or is it a bit of a mix?
It's a little bit of a mix, to be honest. I think the smaller operators, in our experience, the smaller operators are starting to take advantage of what we've done, and where that market is going. I think the larger operators are maybe playing a little bit of catch up around there, and of course they have, they're a big beast to move. They've got all their risk and corporate governance and all that sort of stuff that kind of sits around it. So they are going to be slightly slower, but I think once they see the benefit and they understand the benefit and they see our kind of speed to market with these kind of services, it tends to open the door a little bit quicker for them, and they start to understand that, because there's no way that you're going to roll this out to 2 million users on day one. You're always going to do this as a staggered approach. But if you can do this as a staggered approach, knowing full well that you've got your estate covered, then hopefully it kind of settles the minds of those customers that this is now a real possibility. This isn't the integration headache that it was 5-10 years ago.
So we've talked a bit about connectivity being a fourth utility, fairly commoditized now. I was thinking, actually, I had my water bill recently, which came through, and it went up something ridiculous, about 30%, I think it went up. And when I look at that, and I'm kind of like, what features am I getting? I'm not really getting anything from this, but it's all invisible. Yes, it's like, oh, we're making sure that the pipes continue giving you clean water and stuff like that. But users don't really.
But you tend to expect that, wouldn't you? Really?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
a given, right? It's of course you do. You're my water provider. You give me clean water. Isn't that what I pay you to do? But then when it changes and it goes up, it's kind of like, what additional value am I getting? I'm still getting clean water. That's not changing at the end of the day. So it's, I'd imagine, quite difficult for operators to get that. I mean, maybe it's easier than traditional utility providers to get that value across. But I guess in terms of the investment and the cost that they're making, how do they balance that cost of the value-added services versus what's commoditized? Because I guess the ecosystem will change, and they'll still need to keep making sure that those enabling things are still in place and still healthy and working, versus where they differentiate.
But I think that's where partnerships comes in, doesn't it? So the kind of base infrastructure, the base product that operator has, that service provider has, isn't really going to change. It's connectivity. So that's where their bread and butter is. That's where their market is. So then it becomes around partnerships, and who can you partner with to enable some of these kinds of value add services that we're talking about. And then once you're kind of having those kinds of decisions, then I think the return on investment is actually relatively straightforward. You're either going to charge for it, in which case you've got revenue. You're going to give it away as a customer acquisition strategy, in which case you've probably acquired more customers, so that shouldn't be too difficult to work out. And thirdly, it's maybe some kind of churn reduction point of view as well. So again, you've got 3 key metrics and these key metrics haven't changed since I was involved in it. Again, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, those key metrics are exactly the same. I think there are, in terms of those kind of core objectives, then we then start to come to things that are maybe slightly more difficult to measure and slightly less tangible, but problem sorting in the call center. How have you increased your first time the numbers that you are doing first time call resolution? Because if you have, maybe those are numbers that you need to manage or understand if you're going to truly look at a kind of return on investment. So and obviously you get the NPS scores and customer satisfaction, etc. So I think there are some relatively simple ways to understand that that return on investment. And I personally, I don't think you have to roll it out to 2 million subscribers to work out whether or not there's a return on investment. Again, when we talk about our time to market, it's actually relatively straightforward to do a pilot, a proof of concept, call it what you will. We call it proof of value. But do those kinds of projects and understand at a smaller level, a kind of micro level, what those returns are looking like, and then you've just removed a whole load of risk out of what it is that you're doing. So I think it's relatively straightforward to work out the return on investment. Certainly, I think on what we do, because of the nature of what we do, how it affects a subscriber, and the kind of data that we capture that enables some of their business support systems to maybe function more efficiently.
And validate as you go as well, right? It's not like you need to, as you say, you don't deploy to a massive user base and then hope for the best and check back in a year. It's, you get quite quick validation and feedback on how that's going, and it allows you to adapt, I guess.
No, absolutely, John. So we don't, when the conversations on deployment we have with our operator customers, and we're risk averse as well. We'll say to them, you've got, I don't know, let's say you've got 100,000 users, and they'll want to pilot it on or kick it off with kind of 10,000. You kind of go, no. We need to set our expectations a little bit lower than that, so we can learn from the first 500 to 1,000, work out where we are, and then start to gradually move it up over time. Because you as our customer need to get confidence in what we're doing, for a start, and secondly, doing it the way that we're suggesting that you might want to look at reduces all that operational risk.
So I guess we're getting to the point of wrapping up now, but I've got a couple more questions in the back pocket for you, Paul. So this one's a bit more, we've kind of been reflecting a little bit on what's happened until now. How did we get here? Put your magic hat on, or get your crystal ball out, or whatever your method of predicting the future might be. Look forward 5 years and put yourself in the position of the operator. What do you think you'd be prioritizing between now and the next 5 years, given where we are today?
I think you have to. I think first of all you have to accept that connectivity is a given, but it's a utility. That's the first thing. And I think once you accept that it's a utility, then you can work out what you're going to put on that particular commodity, like cars and roads and bikes. And you build the road, what you're going to put on it. If knowing where we are now and where things are going, I genuinely think those partnerships are going to be increasingly important to an operator. To get speed to market is going to be critical if you're going to take further market share. I do think that there is always a tendency in these kinds of markets to go for the next big shiny thing. And lots of times the next big shiny thing doesn't quite turn out to be as shiny as you thought it was going to be in the first place. So I think that investment decision is going to is desperately important. Where are you going to invest that kind of money? And I genuinely think that if my crystal ball, if nothing else, then work with partners. Partners around, and it might be large partners for outsourcing infrastructure. I don't know, but certainly at the kind of lower level, work with those providers that can get you out to market really, really quickly, and understand that what you have going into the home, and that kind of router that sits in the home, and they're only getting more and more powerful, is your gateway to providing those kinds of services into the home. It's no longer a thing that's stuck in the corner and has a modem in the back of it, and that's it. These have got relatively sophisticated storage. They are multi-core, all of those sorts of things. So you really should be sweating that asset and making sure it does the things that you need it to do. And for me, going forwards, really important that those are recognised, and making sure that you're working with partners to kind of exercise that asset that you've got there.
And I guess it goes back to what we were saying a little bit earlier, right? That operators are now investing in where they can enable that partner ecosystem to thrive, so they can build that and they can make sure that they're in a good place to be able to leverage those partnerships in a way that is easy for them to, or as easy as possible to integrate into their ecosystem. And then, I guess as an operator, they're providing that, for want of a better word, a veneer of the service that goes to the end user. That, behind that, actually, there could be tons of partners that are working to provide that and input into that overall service. But as an end user, you get a nice, polished end user experience. And from your perspective, that's your operator providing that service.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not here to directly support the operators' subscribers, because they want to do that themselves. They absolutely want to do that themselves. They want to bring that, I hate the term, but that kind of single pane, which I'm not a big fan of that term at all, but that kind of consolidated consumer view that sits in the home. So if you are going to move into that kind of digital service provision, and you do have smart home devices, and maybe you are providing insurance, maybe you are providing TV services, all those sorts of things. You want to be able to see that customer and those devices in one place, because you've got multiple bundle services going out. So and I agree. I think that partnership side is desperately important to that, to allow you to launch those things into the market quickly and compete quickly and react if you have to react.
And you said it before as well, from the end user perspective, if all that is coming from one place, it makes it simple for them as well, right? It simplifies that experience. And that's the whole point of doing it in the first place. Imagine a world where that didn't exist and this user was having to go through all those different partners to get what they needed. It would just be a nightmare. So yeah, it's quite a big shift.
Yeah, and you kind of think, so simple equals revenue, doesn't it? At the end of the day, if you can keep things simple for your customers, and you are providing them with a service that they like and they enjoy, and it's simple to use, then that generates revenue and it generates return on investment. So you kind of keep it simple.
Are you saying we need to keep them simply connected, Paul? Is that?
Yeah, you've been thinking about that one all the way through, haven't you?
You could see the cogs turning on.
Yeah, I could.
That's us wrapped up for today. So, Paul, I really appreciate you joining today. Thanks for coming on.
No problem. I've really enjoyed it. Yeah, I think that's flown by. I'm always available to talk about my opinions as and when people want to. Yeah, it's good. But I think we're at an interesting time as well. I think we're at an interesting time where we've got lots of these big kind of technology issues all sort of coming together at once and forming that kind of perfect storm. So it's an interesting time to be involved in this industry sector, I think.
Yeah, agreed. It's why I do what I do. I really enjoy it. And yeah. But yeah, thanks again for coming on, Paul.
No problem. Good stuff. All right. Take care.
So there you go. Hopefully you found that episode insightful. If you have any ideas or thoughts on future topics that you'd like us to cover in this podcast, please do reach out and let me know. But for now, thank you for joining us, and I'll see you next time.